welcome to Your Mac Life for Wednesday, the 10th day of May. Thank you guys very much for joining me here on show number 1134. I'm your host, Shawn King, and thanks for you guys joining me via the archive, if you so choose, or live during the show here on Wednesday evening. May 7th, Sunday, my birthday. Thank you very much for all the birthday greetings. When did when did Facebook start doing this? I don't know if you guys are going to be able to hear this, but there's really cheesy music associated with this. Check it out. Oh my God, that was so full of cheese. It was just incredible. It was just a thank you for everyone on Facebook who sent me the birthday greetings. I appreciate it. It's almost too easy to do on Facebook, but still, I appreciate all the folks who sent in birthday greetings. So thanks very much. Unicorns, exactly. Big special greeting to my good friend and fellow birthday boy, George Canellis, over there in New England. So George, I hope George and I both share the same birthday. So hopefully, George, you had a good one too. I was out apartment hunting, so my birthday sucked. It wasn't any fun at all. On tonight's show, we'll have our good friend Jim Dalrymple of The Loop at loopinsight.com. Hopefully he'll make it this time around, and we'll talk about the Apple earnings report that we didn't get to a chance to get to on last week's show. And then in our starting point photography segment, we're going to talk about seeing the light. Light is the most important aspect of photography. Without light, you can't take pictures. It's simple as that. You don't, as I say in my class, you don't take pictures of dark, you take pictures of light. And so what you have to do to become a better photographer, no matter what camera you're using, whether it's an iPhone or a point and shoot or a DSLR or mirrorless, you've got to learn how to see light. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in the starting point photography segment. I mentioned last week that May is Motorcycle Awareness Month here I think it's in North America. And so I want to make sure that you folks do understand how important this is for us motorcyclists. It's you help keep us alive. Yeah, we can do our own dumb shit, but car drivers help keep motorcycle drivers alive. And I got some emails from folks, which some of them were kind of funny and some of them were kind of interesting. Oh, D8 says, I'll see George C at Friday's LIMAC meeting. So please give George a birthday hug for me, DH. So I got some interesting questions from folks about motorcycles. I guess they took the opportunity to ask me, why do motorcycles do this? And people think that motorcycles are the same as cars. And in one sense they are, but in a very real sense, they're not. So, for example, one of the things that folks you'll see motorcycles do is they'll move back and forth between the white line and the yellow line. They'll go left and right and left and right. And sometimes that's showing off. But for the most part, the reason why motorcyclists do that is a car between the yellow and the white line, or the two white lines, doesn't have much room to move back and forth. So it stays down the center of that lane. Motorcyclists talk about 3 tracks. There's the far right hand side of any lane, there's the middle of the lane, and then there's the far left side of the lane. That's track 1, 2, and 3. Motorcycles will move back and forth between track 1 and track 3 for visibility reasons. So I can see past the vehicles in front of me, so that you can see me behind you, so that other cars behind me can see. So I'll move back and forth depending on where for when I ride, the most important thing I'm thinking about constantly, even in the back of my head, is what can I do? Where can I be that's the safest place for me right now? Given the situation, given the fact I'm on the highway and I'm doing 100 kilometers an hour and all this other kind of stuff, given all the parameters, what's the safest thing I can do? So that's why you'll see motorcyclists moving back and forth in a lane. Conversely, people say, why don't motorcyclists just ride down the middle? Well, next time you're out driving a car, take a look, especially on heavily traveled roads, interstates and freeways and highways, and you'll notice down the center, or track 2 for motorcycles, down the center of the lane is generally will be a little bit darker than on the left side of the center or the right side of the center. And that darkness is oil and dirt and grease and grime and stuff that cars have dropped as they've gone over. Now, a car only drops a minuscule amount of grease, but on heavily trafficked roads where thousands and thousands of cars have gone over each day, month, week, year, that minuscule amount of grease builds up to be a significant amount of grease, and it darkens that center road. Well, grease and oil, by their nature, are slippery. Motorcycles, by their nature, don't like slippery, so we don't ride in that center track. The other reason is, if a car in front of me sees debris in the center of the track, which it often gets blown into, a car can go over it with its two wheels. It'll go on either side of it. But a motorcyclist, if he's in the center lane and the car goes over and I don't see it, then I could hit it. So you avoid riding in that center lane as much as possible. Also got a question about why don't motorcycles stop directly behind me? You'll often see a motorcyclist when they come to a stop at a red light will angle themselves in different ways, or will move to the extreme right or to the extreme left. Well, that's because we're worried about someone behind us coming up too fast. If the person behind us, and this happens unfortunately on a regular basis, someone's coming up to a stoplight and they see the car, but they don't see the motorcycle. They literally will look past the motorcycle and see the hood of the car. And so they'll keep going until they hit the motorcyclist. And then they'll go, oh my God, I didn't even see you. So if the motorcycle is directly behind the car and I get rear-ended, I get pushed into the car. And so I get squashed from the rear and squashed from the front. If I'm angled off to the side of the car in front of me, if, God forbid, I get hit from behind, I get pushed away from the car in front. I get pushed off to either side. The other thing is, for a good motorcyclist, when I come to a stop and I angle myself, I also check my rearview mirrors to see if the person behind me is coming up too fast. And I'll look in my rearview mirrors and watch that person. And I'll start, if I think they're coming too fast, I'll start tapping my brake lights on the motorcycle. The handlebars operate one of the sets of brakes. And so I'll just start tapping my brake light to make sure this guy can see me. If he's still not slowing down or still not able to see me, I'm still in first gear, so I could get out of the way. I could pop the clutch and go in between cars to avoid them. So you want to, again, do the safest thing you can. And so I'm not going to sit directly behind you at a stoplight. I'm going to go off to the side wherever I think I've got an escape route. For me, if it's a left-hand turning, if there's a left-hand turning lane to my left, I'll angle myself towards the left-hand turning lane. Or if there's a large gap between two cars, I'll angle myself towards that large gap just in case I need an escape route so that I can get out of the way. Tom asked, why do motorcycle riders rev their engines stoplights? Those guys are assholes. There's no reason. There's no reason whatsoever for a motorcyclist to rev his engine at a stoplight. I've never done it because my engine doesn't make that kind of noise. It's only those people who basically want you to notice them. That's the only reason for putting loud pipes on a motorcycle is because they want you to notice them. Now, on race motorcycles, the pipes are loud because they've done stuff to them and they add horsepower, or they'll add fuel efficiency, or they'll add some sort of performance issue to the bike. But the vast majority of folks who you hear with these loud pipes have put them on themselves. They don't come from the factory sounding like that. The dealer puts them on, or the rider does it for a third-party thing. And they do it just to get attention. There's no other reason for it. There's no other reason for folks to put loud pipes on their bike. I've never put loud pipes on my bike because there's just no point. Monty says if they're Harley riders, they're likely doing it to keep the thing from stalling out. No, they're just being assholes. They're just being jerks. That's all. Another question is, why do motorcyclists accelerate so fast from traffic lights? Because we can. One of the things about motorcycles that we love is that sense of acceleration. The acceleration on a bike, you've been in a car that's accelerated and you felt yourself pushed back into the seat. Well, multiply that by a factor of 10 on a bike, and acceleration is fun. But the other practical reason, slight practical reason, is it gets us ahead of traffic. It gets us away from the things that can kill us behind us, and that gives me a buffer zone between the cars who are at the stoplight before me and me. And I'll get a quarter mile away or whatever it is so that they can't get at me. Why do motorcyclists wave to each other? Because you're in the brotherhood of motorcycles. That's one of the reasons. One of the things I didn't know about motorcycles before I became a rider. You'll see it occasionally, but nowhere near to the extent of motorcyclists. You'll see Mini drivers wave to each other. Sometimes Jeep drivers wave to each other. Mustangs and Corvette folks might wave to each other. But those are brands. Almost every motorcyclist will wave to almost every other motorcyclist. Now, there are some exceptions, but for the most part, you wave. And it's because you're part of this brotherhood. And it really is. It's really interesting to me that when I became a motorcyclist, I gained a bunch of friends, fellow motorcycle riding friends. People who are willing to help you in any situation. My FJR, one of my FJR groups has got a emergency contact list. And you add your name to the list. And if someone in your area has broken down or can't find a hotel or needs to know some information about where the closest dealership is, or they can call you up and get help, and vice versa. You can call them up and get help too. Two motorcyclists who've never met each other before will go to a gas station and they'll start talking to each other, and you just have a conversation. You don't see that with other cars. And so it's kind of cool. So the wave, for me, the wave has always been a blessing. It's not a hey, hi, fellow rider. It's always be safe. That's what I'm always thinking in my head subconsciously, be safe. That's what the two-finger wave is about. And the other funny thing is the wave is very specific. You can't wave like this. You don't ever wave with your hand above your shoulder. It's almost always got to be that low down, two-finger cool kind of wave. And you would not believe how many new riders get bent out of shape about this aspect of it, where they say, and my wife was this way, she would get so pissed off when people wouldn't wave back to her. She would get just offended. He didn't wave to me. Well, who cares? It doesn't matter if he waved to you or not. You're waving to him, and that's good enough. Or people will say, "Oh, I don't wave to anybody until they wave to me first." All right, fine, whatever. I don't care. I wave to everybody on motorized two-wheel. I'll wave to guys on scooters. You're part of this two-wheel brotherhood. You're putting your life in danger, and I'm giving you my little blessing, my little safety thought. Please be safe. Ride well, kind of thing. So that's why motorcycles wave. Another question was about why do motorcycles always seem to have one headlight out? We don't. That's the high beam. High beams are different on a motorcycle. On a motorcycle, when you turn the engine on, the lights come on. Unlike a car where you flip the switch to turn the lights on. On motorcycles, they're all on automatically. And so oftentimes we'll have two headlights side by side or one above the other. And the second headlight is the high beam. So when we turn the high beams on, both headlights will come on. What other questions were there? Oh, why do riders lane split? It's very common in Europe and in Asia. It's very uncommon here in North America. Only California is it mostly legal to lane split. It's not legal anywhere else. But for Europeans, it's a safety issue. Rather than I was talking before, being hit from behind. Well, if I lane split and come up next to the cars or ahead of the cars, I can't be hit from behind. The other issue, too, is that if people lane split, there's more room for cars behind us. So if the motorcycle takes up this much space and I can get out of that space and go next to cars, well, it means a car can move into that space, and all the other cars behind it move up closer. It also gets the motorcyclist closer to the red light, and so when the light turns green, you can go. Now, the other aspect of lane splitting is when you do it in particular, we've seen it in California, where people will go down the center lines in traffic, and that's incredibly dangerous. The law in California, I believe, is you're not allowed to go more than, I think, 10 kilometers an hour more than the other traffic, and only when traffic is below, I think it's 40 miles an hour. So if traffic is bombing around at 100 miles an hour, you can't legally lane split, and you frickin' shouldn't either. They still do it. Lane splitting can be done safely when it's done safely. Like everything else on a motorcycle, if you do stupid shit, that becomes unsafe and it could end up killing you. If you have any other questions about motorcycles, please let me know. Send me an email to Shawn@yourmaclifeshow.com. I love helping people understand riding or get into riding themselves, if that's something that you are interested in. Shawn@yourmaclifeshow.com. Later on the show, we're going to be talking about seeing the light in our starting point photography segment. But up next, we're going to talk to our good friend Jim Dalrymple of The Loop at loopinsight.com. This is Your Mac Life. Welcome back, folks. Thank you guys very much for joining me here on this Wednesday evening or in the archive if you so choose to listen in that way. I appreciate you listening in any way you can. On our phone, we've got our good friend Jim Dalrymple of The Loop at loopinsight.com. Jim, how you doing?
Doing good. I'm thinking of Mark right now.
I'm sorry, you're what?
I'm thinking of Dave Mark right now.
You're thinking of Dave Mark? Why?
Because his Capitals are playing hockey.
Okay, geez. You had me scared there for a second. I thought, oh my goodness. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Hopefully, I'm more of a Pens fan, if only because of Sidney Crosby and because I used to live in Pittsburgh. I don't really care one way or the other, but it'll be interesting to see that the next series, Ottawa and whoever wins with Washington and the Pens. What's the score of the game?
No score. It's second period right now.
Second period.
Tough game.
It's game 7, so it's gonna be a good game. Unfortunately, I'm going.
And then another game 7 later on tonight.
That's right. And who plays in that one?
Edmonton and Anaheim. That's been a tough series.
We could conceivably, and I know I'm going to jinx it, have 2 Canadian teams in the final.
See? Well, not anymore. Not anymore.
I know. As I was saying, I realized, I'm going to jinx it. Now they're both going to lose.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Well, now there's no sense watching hockey.
That's
anymore.
right. Turn it
You
off.
just ruined it. Yeah.
It is good, though, to see those two teams going as far as they can. I mean, Edmonton's what's called a small market team, and they've had a lot of hardship over the last years since Gretzky left. So it's great to see them come back, and Ottawa's always been a great team, too. So good. I'm glad to see the series are going well.
Yeah.
It was fun to hear Charles Barkley say that he wasn't watching the NBA finals because they were too boring. He was watching the NHL finals.
Did he say that?
He did. He did.
Oh, Charles.
I love Charles. He's such a dick. He's just such a dick. So we missed you on last week's show, so we're going to talk a little bit about the Apple earnings reports that were handed down a week ago on Tuesday. Yeah. One of the interesting things that Tim Cook said that I want to get your opinion on was that he blamed, at least partially, the slowdown in iPhone 7 sales on the rumor mill. Now, as nominally, certainly you, but less so me, journalists ourselves, what's your response to that?
Yeah, he's probably right.
You think?
Sure. But you gotta remember that we're talking about the average consumer and not you and I and the people listening to this show.
Yeah.
We know that there's not going to be a new iPhone coming out until September or October, that time frame.
Yeah.
Because that's when it always does. But as soon as rumors start swirling, then the regular consumer says, oh, I better not buy that. I was just going to buy that. I better not because the new one's coming out. And, of course, it never does.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, this isn't the first time that Apple's been hit by this problem.
But
Steve Jobs said the same thing.
Yep. But can it be considered whining on Cook's part?
No, because they're asking him why, he was down, 1% in iPhone sales?
Yeah.
They're asking him why. Well, here's why. So I don't think it's whining. I think here's the reason. We believe, had a significant part to play in not selling, another million iPhones maybe, or something like that.
So this can be
maybe 5 million. Who knows?
It can be argued then that this financially hurt Apple as a company, not to a great degree, and especially as a company with an $800 billion market cap, soon probably in the next year to hit $1 trillion in market valuation. So, but it did hurt the company in a way. Do journalists have a responsibility to not hurt Apple? In other words, to not report on these kinds of rumors?
No, I mean, we can write and report on whatever we want, but I think the big difference is when you report on something and say, here's what we know so far about the new iPhone 8 that's coming next week, and it's February, and I think that's irresponsible.
Yeah.
Myself. Now, if you say, rumors are that a new iPhone 8 is coming out next week, I don't believe that to be true because for the last 300 years, Apple has released a phone in September. Mm-hmm. So chances are they're going to release it in September again. So I think this is just all shit. Then that's okay. You can still report on it. But I think clarifying the situation is warranted as well.
Yeah.
But, not everybody feels that way because then it's not a sexy headline that you can get lots of hits with. And if that's what you're going for, then there you go.
Yeah, I think that's the issue for me is that this is not, for lack of a better way to describe it, reporting the news so much as just saying whatever pops into your email box. We've seen multiple examples of the exact same website, 1 week reporting that the iPhone 8 is delayed, and then the next week reporting that it's not delayed, then it's going to be announced next week, it's going to be announced. It seems like a lot of these, especially Mac websites, aren't reporting these rumors as news, but just being stenographers to whoever sends them the latest rumor. There's no context. There's no journalistic integrity to these things. Well, or am I wrong in saying that?
Okay, so there's a couple of different ways that websites are doing these. I think Mac Rumors and iMore do a fairly decent job of being able to say, here's a roundup of the rumors.
Yeah.
Right? And they say, because, let's be honest, there's so many of them that they do get lost. So if you're the type of person that's interested in all the rumors and looking at the specs and schematics and these fuzzy photos that you can never tell what the hell it is, there are a lot of people that are interested in that. So they round up all this stuff into different pages, and you can see it all in one place. That's fine. It's the websites that come out and say, yes, this is happening next month. You're going to see an iPhone 8 because we heard from a super secret source. And I'm looking at that saying, it's February. No, that's not going to happen. And, sure enough, it doesn't happen. And then just before it's supposed to happen, these same people will say, oh, it's been delayed.
Yeah.
Well, no, it hasn't been delayed because it's not coming until September.
That's right.
So that to me is irresponsible because, again, you're going to get the average consumer. I'm not saying the average consumer is dumb. I'm saying the average consumer has no reason to pay attention the same way that we do.
Sure.
And I don't blame, if I was going to buy a new car and I did a search on a new car and that model is due to come out with a brand new model this month or next month, oh, hell, I'm going to wait.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't I? So, that's where I think the difference comes in. And I don't expect that every consumer is going to stay up on what's real and what's not, and, what's clickbait and what's not. We can't expect them to do that. So, in a roundabout way, the answer to your question is yes, I do think that this has an effect on the way that people buy.
Yeah.
And, there's not a whole lot that Apple can do about it.
That's going to be my next question is if Tim Cook actually believes that rumors are materially hurting the company, what's Apple's responsibility to squash these leaks and these rumors? And
you know as well as I do what would happen then.
Yep.
They would have to have a full-time person to squash rumors, and that's all they would do.
Oh, it wouldn't even be a person. It'd be a whole department of the company.
Yeah, they cannot do stuff like that. They just can't. I think if you're a reasonable person in our industry, you will say, no, that's not going to happen.
Yep.
That's not going to happen. But, hopefully when people contact, us as people in this industry and say, I heard there's a new iPhone coming out, with a laser sensor and a retina scanner and, a machine gun that drops out of the bottom. Is that true? Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely true. Yeah. Just hold off for 2 more weeks.
Right.
You'll see it.
And now leave me alone.
They're just getting the ammo done now. So.
Well, I will be the first to admit that in the early days of my Macintosh media experience, I was as anal as anyone else about reading every single one of these rumors. And now, but now I don't. I read I read the headlines because they pop up my RSS feed, but I don't click on a single story about Apple rumors anymore because A, I know most of them are full of shit, and B, I can wait. I don't need to know yesterday what the iPhone 8 is going to look like or sound like or feel like. I'll find out in September or October when Apple announces it.
Yeah.
My life will not materially change in any way, shape, or form if I know that the next version of the iPhone is going to have glass all the way around. Doesn't matter. Makes no difference to me. Don't care.
Does not matter.
Until Apple makes it available for sale, I can go to the store and feel it. And that's what I tell folks, too, who ask about these rumors. First thing I say is, I don't care. I don't care about the rumors anymore. It doesn't make any difference. But it is interesting when Apple says stuff on their conference calls that this is hurting them. And make no mistake about it, it's not hurting them a lot. I think the PR,
it's not like 50% or anything like that.
Oh, exactly. I think the PR they get out of these rumors is greater than the damage they get out of these rumors. So I think Apple's doing everything they can to keep a lid on them as much as they can, but they don't actually give much of a concern about it as what some folks think they should.
No, but I do think it's a reasonable answer to the question, why didn't you sell more, or
Yep.
why did you fall 1% short? Well, we wouldn't have fallen 1% short. And what did they sell, like 50 million or something?
I think it was 51 million iPhones. Yeah.
Yeah. Come on.
And the other
worried about 1%.
The other aspect of it too is that if Apple had done better in China, especially in Hong Kong, we wouldn't be having this conversation at all. Tim Cook wouldn't have mentioned the drop in iPhone sales because there wouldn't have been a drop in iPhone sales. Reading and listening to what Cook said with regards to China, do you have concerns about China, the largest market in the world, going forward?
China's a funny market,
Yep.
and I think Apple is doing everything that it to sell as much as it can in China, and that's what it's going to do in India as well.
Yeah.
So I think that we're probably in for another boom in iPhone sales just because they're going to be selling more in India. I think that they'll figure something out in China, but those are two difficult markets, so they'll figure it out.
Yeah,
I'm not concerned.
Yeah, neither am I. I think they're difficult markets, if only because Apple is fairly new to them, all things considered, and they're so completely unusual for Apple, who's used to selling into the West. We don't understand, or we don't often get to understand here in North America and even in Europe, how much different the Chinese market is and how much different the Indian market is even from the Chinese market. There are hundreds and hundreds of phone manufacturers in China that you'll never hear of, but that are very successful because China is the world's largest market. And
Yep.
Apple's got to go into that market with their they're in fact expensive phones, because there's no doubt that a $600, $800 phone in China is hugely expensive compared to the free ones a lot of folks get. So it's always going to be a difficult market for Apple in China and India. They will sell their fair share there. I don't think Apple's ever going to be the dominant reseller in India or China. There are just too many small companies who are willing to undercut them. But I do think they will have success over the long term. Quarter to quarter, there may be some bumps in the road. In the long term, I think Apple's going to be fine in India and China.
Yep, I agree.
But that being said, this was the 13th quarter in a row of lower iPad sales. We should be concerned about that, shouldn't we?
Yeah, I think so, but I think we need to be concerned if all of a sudden this market was changing and moving towards tablets and Apple was still falling,
Yeah.
then I'd be more concerned. The only reason to be concerned at this point is that I don't think people know how to use a tablet as a computer every day.
Yeah.
I really don't. And I think that's the bigger problem. The bigger problem is not that the iPad sucks. It doesn't. The bigger problem is that people don't want the iPad. They do. But I don't think they know how to incorporate it. Now, Mac sales were up.
Yeah. Yeah, the iPad for a lot of folks, even though Apple has tried with various ad campaigns and has tried to convince people that it can replace their laptop, it can replace their desktop PC, I don't think the average consumer is convinced of that. I think the average consumer still wants or thinks they want and need a desktop iMac or a MacBook laptop.
You're exactly right.
And until they can convince themselves that the iPad can replace a lot of these things, and that's the thing that I always find interesting, is that so many folks use the iPhone, which can be demonstrated to be just a smaller version of the iPad. You cannot convince those folks that they should use an iPad in place of that MacBook Pro that they're carrying around, or that desktop iMac that they're sitting looking at. They think they want the power of those bigger machines, when in fact they generally don't use them for email and for web browsing and for Netflix kind of stuff.
Well, if you told me you have a choice to use both or just use or to use both. And I said, okay, I'm going to use both because that's what I do right now.
Yep.
I use both. I was sitting outside using my iPad Pro before you called. So, but if you said, okay, all you have from now on is an iPad,
Yep.
well, that's a different situation. You know, I would do it. I could do it. But given my druthers, I would use both.
Yeah.
And I think that, so if you're going to use both and your main one is your Mac, what are you going to update first?
Mm-hmm.
Your Mac. You know, and I think that's what people are doing because Mac sales have been steady, if not up.
Yep.
So that's what people are doing, I think. And I don't think it's any more than they just don't know how to use it as well as a computer.
I think it's really interesting, the fact that this market is acting in this way. I don't think Apple expected it. I don't think anyone expected it. I don't think anyone knows how to get out of it either. I think there's so many people who just don't understand what consumers think of and want from a tablet, let alone an iPad, that everyone's just sort of grasping at straws, trying to figure something out. Because I think the manufacturers think that the consumer does want a tablet. Maybe consumers just don't want tablets.
No, there's selling too many of them not to want them.
Yeah.
But if, I mean, look at the number of devices that people have to update these days. You know, you have smartphones,
Yep.
will definitely update first.
Yes.
You have computers, you have, you know, the watches or wearable devices, you have iPads. There's just so many things. I think people are choosing smartphones, then computers. Tablets can wait.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree. Yeah, if you go if you go in that order. Another thing that we talked about on last week's show, unfortunately you weren't here, and I want to get your thoughts and impressions on this. Windows 10S was announced, and as Engadget called it, it's a gamble on the future of desktop apps. For those folks who may not understand what I'm talking about, is Windows 10S is going to allow you to only install applications from the Microsoft App Store. You will not be able to go to a website and download apps. You'll be able to go to a website and use a website app, a browser app, but you won't be able to go to download.com and download apps onto a Windows 10S machine. Do you think there's a possibility of Apple locking down the Mac OS in this kind of way?
Well, did they give a reason why they locked it down like that?
Safety and security.
Yeah. I don't think that Apple has those same problems.
So you don't think that Apple would say to its customers, "Hey, we're going to make your experience even safer than before," even if the customer doesn't know that Apple is very, very secure? Wouldn't just the advertising saying, "Hey, this is the most secure OS in the world," make those people go, "Yeah, okay, I'll buy that"?
Well, I think a lot of shit would have to happen before Microsoft could ever make that claim.
No, I'm talking about Apple making that claim.
Oh, Apple making that claim. Well, I think Apple could make that claim anytime.
Yeah, I think there's a possibility of Apple doing this, especially because what they could conceivably do is say, okay, the next version of the operating system will only run apps that are from the Apple App Store. And a lot of apps are already there, so it wouldn't be that much of a hardship. But Apple would also, very much like what Windows 10S is doing, say, hey, you want to download apps from Joe's app shop? Then give us $50 and we'll unlock the OS for you. You can do whatever you want.
No,
I think that's the way for Apple to get additional revenue out of us nerds who want to download stuff from all over the place.
No, I don't think so.
Really?
That's you're trying to create, you know, an unfair monopoly there, unfair use or something. There's something there that's just not right.
You think?
I don't think that they could or would do that. Now, if Apple says we're only going to sell apps from the App Store, that's a problem too, because Apple's guidelines are so restrictive.
Yep, that's right.
In sandboxing that, you know, there's a lot of great apps that we use all the time that are not part of that. They can't be a part of the App Store just because of how their apps are written.
Yep.
And it's not that they're unsafe, it's that they use things and APIs that Apple doesn't want them to use. So I just don't think that Apple would do that.
See, I think there's a possibility of Apple doing it. I think there's a path there that Apple could do this and still allow developers who don't want to use the App Store to be able to sell their apps outside the App Store, but only to those customers who are willing to basically unlock their OS to open a door in the walled garden, so to speak, and allow these outside developers to come in.
No, I can't see that.
Okay.
I really can't.
Tim Cook appeared on CNBC, Jim Cramer's Mad Money show, and one of the interesting things that he said, there's a video up available on the Loop at loopinsight.com if you want to watch the whole video. Tim Cook said, "We think cord cutting is accelerating massively. It's clear what the end story looks like. We'd like to play in this." What do you think Cook means by that?
Well, I think that Tim wants to be, or Apple wants to be, the center of the cord cutting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It doesn't seem at this point that it means that they want to be the ones selling the skinny bundles and things like that, because they haven't and everybody else has. You know, I think everybody but Apple does TV now.
Yeah, exactly.
On the Apple TV, you know, everybody but Apple does it. So clearly they don't see that as being very important.
But the problem is always going to be that right now, to replicate what comes out of the wall from my cable provider through one cable wire, to replicate that is a giant hairball. It's a combination of Netflix and Hulu and Amazon and 15 different kinds of ways of paying for this stuff, and paying for it on the web or on an app or I don't think this is possible for Apple to do that soup to nuts kind of thing that Apple wants to do.
I mean, they've already made one very, very small step towards that in doing the single sign-on and the TV app.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see what they want to do with the TV app.
Yeah.
It doesn't work right, but it can't, because, as you said, it's a hairball.
Yeah.
You know, so you can see that they're moving towards something where they will be the central hub of all of this stuff, and they're trying to make it easy. And it's not, but they're trying. So if you look at the advances in Apple TV over the past couple of years, they've probably done more in the past couple of years than what they've done in past decade with it. So they're trying, and I think once everything else gets worked out, I mean, who just came out with one? Hulu.
Yeah,
just came out with live TV.
Yep, that's right.
So I think that they'll get there. I mean, it's going slower than the iPad. So
yeah, that's right.
But there you have to deal with networks.
It's one of the problems that Apple has, I think, is that they're hamstrung by their own success and by their own ability to make things simple. It would be easy for Amazon, for Apple to do a Microsoft and just sort of throw everything against the wall and see what sticks. But we expect perfection from Apple. Apple can't do this stuff piecemeal. They've got to, when they announce something, it's got to be perfect, soup to nuts from the beginning to the end of the process. But because of all the different placeholders and content holders of all these different stations and TV shows and networks and that kind of stuff, Apple can't do it all at once. So I think that's part of the problem, is that Apple is not going to be able to do all this stuff unless it buys up Hulu and all these other companies and just jams them all together into the Apple TV.
I don't think that's what they want to do, though.
No, I don't think so either. Talking about the future, yesterday, or was it yesterday or Monday, Amazon announced the Amazon Echo Show. What were your first impressions when you heard this announcement?
Honestly, not much.
Do you have an Amazon Echo now? Under the bridge?
No.
Would it work under the bridge? I don't think it would. I don't think it would even work under the bridge, would it?
No, it's too much noise.
Exactly. That's right.
I tried it.
And I don't have an Amazon Echo either. I don't need one in my home. I understand why folks use them. I understand how they use them. I like the idea in a big picture concept of having the option of looking at things on a screen. My first impression of the Amazon show was, of the Echo show, was that it's kind of ugly, but they kind of didn't have much of a choice either. This is the nature of the design they're going to have to do. It's got to look like a little tiny TV. You know, people are including people like Gruber are bitching about how homely it is, but they don't really have much of a choice. I can't see much of a better design.
Well, the choice was not to do it.
Well, true, but I think the choice is a good one. I think this makes sense for Amazon. Does it make sense for Apple? This is what people have been talking about. Phil Schiller last week said that that he thinks these kind of devices need screens. That we all assume Apple is coming out with one, perhaps announced at WWDC, a Siri speaker that will have one of these kinds of screens. And does that make sense for Apple as a company?
Well, I just don't know, because I've talked to so many people about the Amazon Echo and, Alexa and all that kind of stuff, and clearly there's a lot of interest in it. The people, most of the people that I know that use them, love them.
Yep.
But I just can't see how it could be that useful to me.
Yep.
I really can't.
But I think part of the problem is that you and I are not heavy Siri users either. I think that's part of the problem that you and I personally have with this. We don't use Siri the way so many other people seem to use them on a minute-by-minute regular basis. Yeah.
Well, I asked Siri the other day what the NHL schedule on, and she said that there were no games on. I turned the TV on, and there was a game on.
I know. Yeah, I get the same stuff. I know lots of folks love Siri. I know Siri works perfectly well for a lot of other people. But for me personally, 9 times out of 10 when I use Siri, it just doesn't work the way I am expecting it to. Now, is that my fault for not saying things properly? In which case, screw you, Siri. Or is it Siri's fault for not being able to understand me, or the syntax isn't working? I just don't get it. To me personally, how people love these kinds of devices. And universally, people do. You see very little hate online for the Amazon Echo. Folks love the idea of the Amazon Echo. And transposing that into a Siri-type device, you got to assume a lot of folks would love an Apple version of this.
Well, you would think so. You would think, but I don't know. Maybe if I had picked up an Echo, I would love it.
Yep.
But I didn't pick one up and still haven't, because I just can't see a use for it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Same
so, maybe a Siri speaker. What is it that a Siri speaker is going to do? Really?
It's basically
going to do?
It's basically going to answer the same questions that the Amazon Echo does. And for me personally, I don't need Siri to answer questions when I'm sitting in front of my computer 10 hours a day, and I just type those answers in myself. And when I'm sitting,
Siri doesn't answer a lot of my questions.
Exactly.
She takes me to the web or something.
That's right.
So...
And then when I'm sitting somewhere else besides my computer, when I'm sitting on the couch, I've got my phone in my hand or my tablet in my hand. I can just type in the response. I don't need to use Siri to ask the questions of, hey, Siri, who are the actors in this movie? She's not going to know. And as I say that, Siri pops up and go away, Siri. Jesus.
Sorry.
Shut up. So yeah, for me personally, the MacMan in the IRC chat room says, I find them creepy. I don't know if I find them creepy so much as for the amount of money they charge, it's very much for me like the Apple Watch. I see the value in it for other people. But for the amount of money they want out of me, I don't see the value in it for myself.
Well, Apple has explained before that Siri is different than a typical assistant, because they want Siri to be able to do things for you, like set a reminder or create an appointment or, these types of things. So that is a different type of thing. But if you allow Siri to answer questions, then it really should know the answers to those questions. who's the president, or who stars in this movie, or don't take me to the web. I can go to the web myself.
Yep, that's right.
So if you can't answer these questions, or what's the NHL schedule today, and it gives me, well, this game is on tomorrow. Okay, so there are no games on today. Great, I'll turn on the TV and there's a hockey game.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I just find Siri fails more often than not, and when I do use it, and again, I don't use it all that often, but I find it fails more often than not, or I have to try multiple attempts at different syntaxes or using different words, and it just ends up frustrating me, and I go to Google and Google the thing I'm asking Siri about. So now,
well, and it's the same with appointments, though, for me.
Yep.
I mean, a lot of times if I say, set up an appointment tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. with Shawn, to talk about, the show.
Yep.
Siri comes back with this convoluted thing that, it doesn't know. So, and by the time I get through telling it all the things that I already told it, I could have typed it in and been done.
Exactly.
So that's what I tend to do. So,
I definitely believe Apple's going to enter this space in some way, shape, or form. I don't know whether it's going to be as a dedicated speaker or a la the Amazon Echo, or an upgraded Apple TV, or an upgraded Apple Watch or phone. I think they're going to get in here. I just am interested in seeing how Apple's going to convince people like me to want to fork over $200-$300 for this thing when I'm already sort of against using them to begin with. Maybe I'm just not the target market for Apple, and therefore it's a moot point. Folks, I've been talking to Jim Dalrymple of The Loop at loopinsight.com. He's here almost each every week when he's not busy doing other things. Thanks,
wow,
Jim.
What an asshole.
No kidding. Go enjoy the game, buddy.
Thanks, man.
All right, see you. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, I am. Sometimes I cop to that. I have no problem admitting that. It's true. I am. Someone wrote an interesting article. Where was this one? This was on Gizmodo. And I think this says a lot about people's feelings about self-driving cars. The headline says, self-driving cars feel like death traps. Can we be convinced otherwise? Maybe that's why so many people are reticent about self-driving cars. Like truly self-driving cars, not the autonomous cars where you can get into a Tesla and sort of take your hands off the wheel because there's a wheel that you can then control. But true self-driving cars where there is no wheel, there is no gas pedal, there is no brake, there is no driver's side of the car. All 4 seats, 5 seats, 6 seats will be passenger seats. For a lot of folks, that's freaking terrifying. Because we know technology doesn't always work. And whether that technology is Siri not being able to understand my voice, or my self-driving car driving off a cliff, I think that's what a lot of folks have concerns about when it comes to true self-driving vehicles. And that's why I think it's going to be a lot longer to get here with the self-driving cars than it would have been otherwise. I think that's a big deal. Wayne says, as long as the technology failure rate is lower than the human failure rate, I'm all for it, which it already is. Yes, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about convincing human beings to buy these autonomous vehicles, to use these autonomous vehicles. It doesn't matter if you tell people the failure rate is 0.01%. They're still going to hear you say, there's a failure rate. The failure rate of cars, of human error in cars, is probably 25% when it comes to accidents, if not higher. Yet we get into cars because we control the car, because we don't think it's going to happen to us. That's why people text and drive. Everyone knows texting and driving is dangerous. Everyone knows texting and driving is against the law. And yet still fully 80% of drivers text and drive. Why? Because they don't think they're going to get into an accident. Everyone else is a moron, but they're a good, responsible driver. It's like speeding. People speed because they think, I'm a safe driver. I can go faster than the speed limit. It's dumb. It's too slow. I can go faster. There's two things human beings, especially men, will never admit they're bad at: having sex and driving. Nobody ever admits that they're a shitty driver. Everybody thinks they're a good driver. Well, if that's the case, why are so many people dying in cars? So it's got nothing to do with failure rates or things like that. It's got to do with the human perception of what these things can do for and to us, I think, is the key for all this. In our starting point photography segment for this evening, also want to remind you guys that if you want to take one of the online classes via Google Hangouts, they are on demand. They are $75 a piece. As Wayne has said, I did a class 2 weeks ago with him, with Wayne's mom and his dad. Had a great time. It was always wonderful talking to fellow Nova Scotians. But Wayne said, and for anyone who's remotely interested in photography or knows anyone who is, I highly recommend Shawn's course. My folks found him very informative, engaging, and handsome. Okay, I may have added that last part in, but we'll just let it go. Send me an email to Shawn at yourmaclifeshow.com if you want more information on that. One of the things I teach in the class is how important it is to see the light, how light affects your photography. And what I mean by that is, as I've always said, we don't take pictures of dark, we take pictures of light. If you want to be a better photographer, you want to be a good photographer, you've got to learn to see light. And I don't mean that in a artsy fartsy Buddhist kind of new age kind of way. I mean, you have to start looking at the way light comes out of things, like the sun, light bulbs, the way light reflects off of things. That's how we see light. It bounces off of objects and goes into our eyes. The way light shows up in even shadows. The way light bounces off of puddles. The way light sparkles. Everything about light, you've got to start looking for and at it. Because when you start seeing light, your photos become better. Because you'll know what is good light and bad light for the given situation. Generally, what we tell folks as beginning photographers is, I tell folks, especially when they're traveling, I say between 10 and 4 p.m., be a tourist. Just go and do touristy type things. Don't take pictures. Because in general, between 10 and 4 p.m. is when you're going to have the worst kind of light. And that's direct sunlight. That's that light that's coming down straight from the sun, right over top of you, and it's giving you these ugly shadows over your nose and your eyes and underneath your chin. It's very flat light because when it comes down on buildings and flowers and whatever other things that you're going to shoot, it's not an attractive quality of light. For a beginner, the best time to shoot is what's called the golden hour. And that's the half hour before and after sunrise and sunset. That's when the light is this golden color. It's this wonderful orange color. You'll see it in the sky, in the clouds, and it turns pinky and then turns blue. It's a wonderful, wonderful light to take pictures with, of anything. So we tell beginners to focus on at the beginning, on shooting in those two golden hours, sunrise and sunset. But sometimes you can't do that. Sometimes the situation doesn't provide for it. But ArcSign says, see the light, understand the light, be the light. Exactly. That's the kind of thing that I'm trying not to talk about. Because I don't want it to sound that, like I said, artsy. It is to a certain degree, but I don't want to make it sound like it's too much. And I'm just going to show you these photos from a website called Petapixel. And they're really neat examples of different kinds of light at different times of day. So the first photo is at noon. Okay, so it's at the photographer took this shot at right in the middle of the afternoon at noon. If you look at the photo, it feels kind of flat. It doesn't feel like there's much depth or detail there. The light is all, you can see the shadows. There's very, very few shadows. The light is coming down straight from above. So there's not much detail in the photo. There's no place that is drawing your eye except maybe to the central dome of this, of these ruins. Now take a look at this shot at sunset. This is with the sun just going down behind that hill in the background. There's not as much shadow, but there's more detail now. There's not as much light, but there's more detail now. Take a look at the before. I'll see if I can't do this as a before and after. There's the before, and there's the after. Can you see more detail, more depth to this photo because it's at a different time of day? There's a different kind of light. Next up, the photographer took a shot at what's called the blue hour. Now, the blue hour is, we talked about the golden hour, that half hour before and after sunrise and sunset. The blue hour is a half hour, so the blue hour would be an hour before sunrise and an hour or half an hour after sunset. So the sun's got to be completely out of the sky. And once the sun's gone completely down, it's not dark yet. It's dusk. And everything has this blue tinge to it. It's really kind of a neat effect. And you can start looking for this right now. Looking for this kind of light right now. For those of us here on the West Coast, it's now 6:32 p.m. The sun's going to go down another hour, hour and a half. And once the sun goes down, start looking for this blue in the sky, for this blue around you. It's a completely different kind of light. It makes a huge difference in the feeling of the photograph. Next up is the night light. This is obviously a long exposure shot where you'll be able to see skies and details that you can't see any other time. And you can't see with the naked eye a lot of these kind of things. This is where a camera can see things that you can't. When you can hold the shutter open for long periods of time, your shutter is able to gather in a lot more light that you can't even see, but you know it's there. And so you leave the shutter open for 10, 15, 30 seconds, whatever it might be, and you gather up all this light. Even though it's very, very dim, you gather up all this light and you get these great nighttime shots. A shot that you couldn't get any other time of day, and you can't get just by snapping and taking a picture. And then you have the next kind of light, which is that sunrise. Again, this is the opposite golden hour. This is the sunrise golden hour. The blue hour happens before sunrise. The sunset blue hour obviously happens after sunset. So you gotta keep that in mind. So this is another photo, exact same place. All these are obviously of the same place. So what you need to do is start seeing light. Just if you have a balcony, it's a perfect example of doing this. I've got there's a bunch of apps on the App Store. Do a search for sunrise or sunset. There's some free apps. There's 99-cent apps. There's all kinds of apps that you can download. And set the app up so that it reminds you. I've got my app. It's called Rise On. My app is set to remind me a half hour before the golden hour of sunset. And I don't always go out and take pictures at that time, but it's nice getting the reminder on my phone. And so what you do is you get the reminder and then go sit outside on your balcony or on the front stoop of your house or your porch, whatever it is. Go sit outside and watch the light change. So you don't have to take pictures. Just watch the light change around you. Watch it go from fairly bright sunlight down to much dimmer light, but also more orangey. The color temperature of the light actually changes. It goes from that bright white, yellow light that we have to an orange light, then to pink as the sun gets about halfway down the horizon. And then once the sun goes below the horizon, that's when you get the blue hour, and then you'll get into full-on dark. Just sit, relax, have a cup of coffee, bring your iPhone out there and read your Twitter feed while you're waiting for it. And every couple of minutes, just look around you and notice how the light has changed. Not only in the sky, but how the light has changed reflection-wise. How it's changed the way it reflects off that car, or how it's changed the way it reflects off those trees, or off the grass of your home, or through the windows behind you. Start looking around for this kind of light. Because once you, Monty says, I use an app called Magic Hour. Yeah, there's all kinds of apps that you can use. Because once you start seeing the light, then you can start shooting at any time of the day. You don't have to shoot just at sunrise and sunset. You can actually shoot during the brightest part of the day if you find the right conditions. When you start looking for light, I guarantee this is going to happen because it happened to me. It happens every beginning photographer. You will spend X amount of time walking around doing this. Just looking, you'll look like a pigeon. You're always looking around for stuff. But after a while, after a lot of practice, it becomes very instinctive. I know right now what the light is like outside. I know what kind of photography I can expect to get with the light that's here right now. When I'm out walking with my photo meetup groups, I know, because of the time of day, how the light's going to be reflecting off of that building. I know that if I go over here, I'll get this kind of light in these shadows. I know that when it's raining, I can expect to see this kind of light bouncing off the pavement. It's just from practice and repetition and shooting and shooting and shooting. And as I've always said to you guys, none of this stuff matters if you don't go out and practice it. Learn, focus, practice. Learn what this stuff is, focus on doing it, and then practice doing it. If you don't practice, none of this stuff matters. It doesn't matter what apps you have on your phone. It doesn't matter what kind of camera you have. If you don't practice becoming a good photographer, you will not become a good photographer. It's simple as that. If you have any other questions about photography in general or about light, please send me emails to Shawn at yourmaclifeshow.com. You guys know I love helping you folks out, figuring this stuff out. So please send me all the photo questions that you would like. Someone was asking, where is this one? Who sent this one? Who sent this one? Ethan. Sorry, I couldn't find your email address. Ethan, sorry. Ethan sent this question about cameras. We were talking before about the age of cameras. He said, is it too late to buy a Nikon D7100, considering that it was released in 2013? Should I go for the newer version, the Nikon D7200? Generally, if you can afford it, buy the newest model you can. Simple as that. If you have the money, buy the newest one you can, because the newest camera you have will have better technology. Camera technology changes rapidly. Once every 6 months to a year, every manufacturer has a brand new sensor that does 10 times more things than the previous one did. Every year, every manufacturer brings out new cameras that have new features that the previous ones didn't do. So you might as well buy the newest, bestest one you can afford. If you have to skip a mortgage payment to buy a newer camera, then don't. The D7100 is a good camera. Even though it's 3-4 years old, you can still take good pictures with that camera. Your performance envelope of that camera is less. The sensor isn't as good. The ISO isn't as good. I'd be willing to bet the shutter speeds don't go as low or as high. So the technology of the camera is still going to be old technology. That doesn't mean, though, you can't take good pictures. As long as you stay within the performance envelope of what the camera is capable of. So, for example, if you want to take low light shots, then you find out what the highest ISO the D7100 can shoot at without giving you unacceptable noise, and stay there, shoot there. You don't go past that. You don't, if it shoots at 3200 perfectly well, don't go to 6400. Stay within the performance envelope of the camera. Do what the camera can do, and don't try to make the camera do something it can't do. We've all seen folks trying to take iPhone shots in dark places, and they just don't come out well because the iPhone is not a very good low light camera. You're going outside the performance envelope of the iPhone. You're trying to make it do something it's not designed to do. So yeah, if you can afford the 7200 or better, then go ahead and buy the 7200 one or better. It just makes more sense to buy the best that you can. Mike Coolis sent me in this this story from Digital Trends. 2 photographers used a 0.3 megapixel kid's toy camera, and their shots will amaze you. Well, actually, no, they won't. Their shots are not going to be amazing to me because they're pros. This is what pros do. They shoot well. This is the idea of being a pro, that you can take any camera and get good shots with it. Now, I guarantee you those pros weren't shooting in low light conditions. Those pros weren't trying to shoot race cars going by. Those pros weren't trying to shoot beyond the capabilities of the camera. You would have handed the camera to the pro. The pro would have gone, okay, it's this kind of camera. It can do this, so I will shoot within the abilities of this camera. I guarantee you if those pros had taken the 0.3 megapixel kids camera and gone out trying to shoot the Kentucky Derby, they would have gotten shitty photos because you can't go outside the performance envelope of the camera, no matter how good a photographer you are. So yeah, those kinds of things don't surprise me at all. I get this question all the time. Which DSLR is best for beginners? This is from Raphael. Raphael, any camera is. I keep saying this. I keep telling you guys this. Any camera made in the last 5 years is going to be good and good enough for a beginner. Not for a pro, not for an advanced enthusiast, but for a beginner. Learn how to use the camera. Learn how to take good photos first before you worry about what's the best DSLR. If you're a Canon person, buy a Rebel. If you like Canon gear, buy a Canon Rebel. You won't go wrong with a Canon Rebel. If you're a Nikon person, buy a D3300. You won't go wrong with that camera. But buy the camera you can afford. Buy the camera you're going to use and learn how to use that camera. Go out and be a good photographer with that camera. And then worry about the next camera that you're going to get. It doesn't matter which DSLR you buy when it comes to being a beginner. Other questions we got in the past week. I want to say thanks to both Tim Simbura and Shawn A. Kruger for helping me out with the question that Don Beck asked last week with regards to FileMaker Pro. Both those guys are FileMaker experts, so thank you guys very much for that. Michael Koulis also sent an email. After hearing last week's podcast, I have to say I would be open to a closed garden with my Mac OS Sierra. And paying a modest amount to access outside the garden would not be terrible. But I've had concerns recently. After listening to the VPN expert you had on, I've been thinking a lot more about the digital footprint I leave. And also the fact that with services like Facebook and Instagram, I'm not the customer, I'm the product. Do you believe that the Safari browser and other Apple software that would be in the closed garden would be the opposite of Google Chrome, which uses me as the product? Will Apple protect my privacy? Michael, Apple does that now. If those are your concerns, then you're not going to worry about Apple having a closed OS. They do that now. Apple doesn't see their customers' data as sellable the way Google does. That's Google's business model, to get information from you and then sell that information to advertisers. The advertiser is the customer for Google. With Apple, you're the customer. And Apple's made it very, very clear many, many times they have no interest in selling your data to advertisers, your specific data to advertisers. They may use your data in aggregate, and they will also do what they call anonymize it, so it can't ever be traced back to you. So right now, if that kind of data privacy is your concern from those two companies, Apple does a much, much better job of protecting your data than Google will ever do. Our friend Scott Randall is catching up, so we've got quite a bit of stuff to talk about. He's with the Long Island Macintosh user group. One question first on Flickr. I've got quite a few vacation photos I've not even started to edit yet. I'd like to put them on Flickr for now, just as an extra backup, not to show anyone. Once I work on a photo, I would like to put it up there in a different folder. As of now, I'm not looking to make any of them public. Okay, there was no question there. You can do that, Scott. That's easy to do. You can easily upload those photos to Flickr, and you would put the privacy setting on the photos to private, only you can see them. You can edit them in Flickr, if you would like, and then turn that privacy setting back to public. And boom, that photo would show up on your Flickr account. So that would be a fairly easy thing to do. Okay, Apple putting out a Mac OS that is a completely closed system and charging extra for an open one? In my opinion, they don't have to. Apple is a hardware company. Most of the money comes from selling hardware. That's why they give the operating systems away for free. The goodwill they keep by not charging extra is more important than the few extra dollars they would make on those few users who would insist on the open system. If people want the safest system they can get, and as you say, most people don't do what we enthusiasts do, they can spend the money for the iPad and $100 for a keyboard. That would probably be enough for the average person. With regards to motorcycles, whenever I see a motorcycle riding around me on the parkway, I become nervous for their safety. Well, thank you, Scott. I appreciate that. A good friend of mine is a motorcycle rider and enthusiast. He agrees with me that a large number of motorcycle riders do not drive safely and do not obey New York State laws. Well, to be fair, that's true of car drivers too. I've lived and driven and ridden around the world, and I can tell you categorically, everybody's a shitty driver. In aggregate, every place I've ever been has shitty drivers. And every place has shitty motorcycle riders. So I'm not going to blame people in New York State for that. The ones who drive between the lanes get very worried. They don't realize that one wrong move by them or the auto driver could mean their death. They realize it. They just don't care. They don't think it's going to happen to them. It's also against New York State law for them to ride between lanes. You're absolutely right. The other thing which affects autos as well as motorcycles is loud tailpipes with no muffler. Above a certain decibel level, it's against state law. Something that loud racing past you can be so startling that it can cause someone to do something that might get them into an accident. The problem is with that, and I know this having lived in and around New York State, is the state law is almost unenforceable of decibels because the cops don't carry around decibel meters. Unlike radar detectors, very much like radar detectors, in order to enforce a noise ordinance on a motorcyclist, or a car for that matter, you've got to measure the decibels. And cops don't carry those things around. So the cops generally don't enforce the noise complaints. Autonomous vehicles. The technology will soon, within 10 years, be in place so that autonomous vehicles will be completely safe. Of course, they'll have to make them hack-proof. Good luck with that. The legal and insurance details will then have to be settled. I believe in order for them to work, all vehicles must be autonomous. As you said, the individual person mostly does not have to have a vehicle sitting in their driveway. Services to which you would pay a monthly fee would pick you up and drop you off whenever you needed. These vehicles should be completely electric. I believe we will have the technology to improve the range of these, and they already have the technology to produce electricity solely from wind and sun. In fact, I've read that by wind alone, they can produce 20 times the amount of electricity the U.S. needs. Plenty left over for Canada. All that has to happen is the government has to be willing to invest in the infrastructure. Yeah, I know, easier said than done, he says. You would not have to worry about insurance, parking, repairs, etc. I see this as being really convenient. Now, one thing you would lose, there cannot be an autonomous motorcycle unless they had 3 wheels. They would have to create tracks for people who want to drive for fun. All in all, this will not be an easy transition. Thanks, Scott. I appreciate your words on that. There was a study actually came out today that showed even one autonomous vehicle in a group makes everyone a better driver, interestingly enough. I don't think we're going to have to, not have to. There is absolutely no way that we're going to be able to switch from people behind the wheel to self-driving autonomous vehicles overnight. It's just not possible. It's not going to happen that way. So what's going to happen is there's going to be a mix of varying kinds of vehicles. The majority, I believe, in the next 10 years will still be human-powered or human-driven. Then you'll have a mix of Tesla-type vehicles, which will have semi-autonomous mode, what they used to call autopilot, where there's still a steering wheel, you're still sitting behind the wheel, but the car is doing most of the driving itself. And then there'll be a smaller percentage of what are called level 5 vehicles. Those are the fully autonomous vehicles, the ones that don't even have a steering wheel, don't have a brake pedal, don't have gas, and those are the level 5 vehicles. That's where we're going to go eventually, is level 5, but not in the next 10 years. I think there is going to be too much pushback. One of the things that you mentioned in your email was they're going to have to be hack-proof. Well, nothing is hack-proof. Certainly nothing in this level is going to be hack-proof. So what happens when someone hacks autonomous vehicles? ArcSign says single-payer transportation, mass transit. Sounds good. Yeah, but mass transit, the problem with mass transit is we haven't put enough money into it. We put all our money into cars and car infrastructure. Mass transit for a lot of people sucks for any number of reasons. Having been a mass transit user for most of my adult life, if you have a car, you generally prefer a car because I control the car. I'm the one in the car. I'm not going to worry about the guy next to me making noise or smelling. I can go where I want, when I want. I can go from my front door to my office front door. I don't got to get dropped off 2 blocks away and walk down. All the issues that people have with mass transit. When mass transit is done well, it's the best system. But it's very, very rarely done well to that degree. And the further you get outside of a city's core, the less useful mass transit becomes. When I lived in Surrey, which is about half an hour drive from, say, downtown Vancouver, it was a 2.5-hour bus ride to get from where I lived in Surrey to the same place in downtown Vancouver. When we had a car, half an hour. When we took the bus, it was one bus to the SkyTrain. We took, no, actually, now I think about it, we took a bus from 2 blocks away from our home to a bus drop-off point. We got off the bus, got onto another bus that took us to the SkyTrain, and then from SkyTrain, we got to downtown Vancouver. That's 3 different vehicles I've got to go on. And it takes 3 times as long. So if you're in the downtown area of Vancouver or any major city, mass transit works much better. And now for me out here in Chilliwack, where I'm an hour away from downtown Vancouver, a bus would take approximately 5 hours to get from where I'm sitting right now to downtown Vancouver. That's not feasible, taking 5 hours to get someplace. Monty says, look at Metro Atlanta for a great example of mass transit not done well. Yeah, and that's downtown Atlanta, downtown everywhere else. Most places do not have good public transit because we've been so focused on the car. And that's not going to change. That's the downside is we've gone too far down that path to be able to change that stuff. Some places try various ways of doing it. London with their system of tolls when you take your car to the center of London. Maybe that can work in other countries, other cities. I don't know how well it works in London. You've got to have a central government willing to piss off a lot of people in order to force them to give up their cars. And it's really hard to force, especially those of us here in North America, to give up our cars. Europe, it's a little bit easier because they have decent mass transit and really good train systems too. And it's a much smaller, more compact urban environment. You can get around places by train much, much easier. So It just is not going to work here in North America. MacMan, in Europe isn't as spread out as North America. Exactly. And I knew a guy many years ago who he lived in Germany, and on Friday afternoon he'd leave work at noon and jump on a train and go to Switzerland to go skiing. I mean, that's just mind-boggling. He's going to go to a different country to go skiing. And it took him like an hour to get there. Whereas where I live here in Vancouver, to get to a different country actually only takes about half an hour. If I want to get to the States, now that I think about it. But for the vast majority of us, to get to a different country is a significant trip. Arcsign says, does anyone consider how much it costs to build and maintain the 4, 5, and 6 lane Los Angeles freeways? Oh, absolutely. But the problem is, people who drive on those freeways want them. They want their governments to spend money on the freeway and not mass transit. Again, that's why I say there has to be a central government that says, all right, we're going to do this. It's going to piss you off, but we're going to do this. And no politician is got the cojones to piss off that many car drivers. It's simple as that. Because for the vast majority of instances, lower income people take public transit, higher income people will drive. And higher income people are going to vote and donate and make comes the whole political system all in a nutshell. It's just a hairball. Steve says in the Slack chat room, around here people even bitch if you try to give options because it often takes away car bandwidth. Exactly. There's got to be a movement by car drivers to get rid of their own cars. It can't come from the mass transit people. It's got to be from the car people who have to say, you know what, I'm willing to give up my car if you'll give me better mass transit. If that happens, then there'll be a change. But until that happens, until car drivers are willing to give up their cars, and there's an easy way to get car drivers to give up their car. It's the simplest way in the world. If we had gas prices that our European friends did, most of us would get the hell out of our cars, especially for those of us who live closer to a city. Can you imagine if you were paying $7, $8, $9, $10, $11 a gallon for gas? How fast would you give up your car? Imagine that. $10 a gallon for gas. Right now, America's spending, what, about $3 a gallon? Here in Canada, it's almost $5 a gallon. Double or triple that. And I guarantee you'll get out of your car real fast. You'll look to buy an electric car real fast. You'll look to do ride sharing and autonomous vehicles and all that other kind of stuff. Right now, there's no incentive for us to get out of our cars or me to get off my motorcycle because it's still cheap enough that I can afford it. Folks, that's it for tonight's show. Thanks very much for that. I appreciate the emails and the conversation about mass transit. If you have any other thoughts about that, let me know. Send me an email to Shawn at yourmaclifeshow.com. We can continue this conversation on next week's show. I want to say thanks to my good friend Jim Dalrymple of The Loop at loopinsight.com for joining me here on tonight's show. And as always, thanks to you guys for being listeners and for participating in this little show. Until next week, as always, I've been Shawn King, and you've been listening to Your Mac Life. See ya!